The crucial part is getting rid of tyranny. We happen to be living in a system which would have driven the founding fathers up the wall, and which any Enlightenment figure like Adam Smith or someone would have found horrendous. It's a tyrannical system in which power is more and more going into the hands of totalitarian structures which are unaccountable, namely private corporations.
Now, true, we all need money, simply because we've all agreed that we all need money. There's no other reason. Yeah, it's important to understand this about money. A lot of people don't know it. Money is a measure of wealth. Money is not wealth. We are living under conditions where money, as I have tried to explain, is not understood, where it is not seen for the fiction and the useful fiction which it is.
Welcome to the Philosophical Minds podcast, the podcast about the stuff we wonder about and other things.
All right, we are here with Keegan Francis, a cryptocurrency investor and educator straight out of Nova Scotia. He's got a background in computer science. He's been involved with mining projects. He's written an extensive amount of articles on all things crypto. So Keegan, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm good, Scott. Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. How's the weather down there in Nova Scotia?
Oh, Nova Scotia's good. We had a big like deluge of water just come out of the sky yesterday, and that's kind of how it goes over here.
That's awesome. So you and your wife run a company together, I believe. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what you guys do?
Right, yeah. So we run the Atlantic Blockchain Company, and that's based out of Halifax, Nova Scotia. And we could talk a little bit about blockchain later. What we're doing right now is we host a podcast. It's called Go Full Crypto. So essentially we're cryptocurrency onboarders. We help people get into cryptocurrency, learn about it, and essentially we help people improve the state of their lives through cryptocurrency. And that's kind of a cool thing.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm not a very financially savvy person. I've never had much of an interest in like the stock market or any of that jazz, although crypto...
Me neither.
Crypto has always intrigued me, though. I think it is potentially the antidote to many of the pitfalls of the traditional monetary model and the antidote to some of the limitations of centralized fractional reserve system, whether it's policy censorship or weaknesses of wire transfers, or there's just so much potential. So I'm always, trying to expand my understanding in this area. And fortunately, and I haven't mentioned this to you yet, but it's going to be a fun conversation because my wife has a very unique position in this world, and I'll go ahead and let her introduce herself and tell you a little bit about.
Yeah, my name's Ashley Bryan. Hi.
Hey.
I actually am an attorney that works with, technology clients, taking them through licensing in the U.S. And I deal with some international law because we have to do GDPR and things like that. Some of my clients are actually overseas, so it'll be kind of an interesting interplay. I have a background also in, building computers and web design and all of that before I went to law school. And then in law school, I kind of dove in by starting to research and write about crypto. And then it just so happened that my first corporate client wanted to go through licensing. And so I kind of fell into it, and then I fell in love with it. So that's a little bit about my background.
Like, you fell in love with crypto?
Yeah, it's something that I love the look on attorneys' faces when they say, "What do you do?" And I say, "Well, I take them through my clients through MTL, and I do AML policies and work with FinCEN and cryptocurrency," and their eyes kind of glaze over because in this field there are really a handful of attorneys that understand like what cryptocurrency is. And even at the state level, I'm constantly working with banking divisions, and they'll have someone that comes into the division that's new, And it's kind of neat because I've worked with the prior, heads of those divisions, and it's a learning process for each person who steps into it, because it's so, the atmosphere is constantly changing, which I love, because a lot of areas of law, it's kind of static. It doesn't change too much. It's workers' comp, it's pretty grounded. Tort law, kind of stays the same, but with crypto, it is constantly changing.
It's a whole new beast.
Right.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of work to be done in the legal aspect of things. Like, we actually kind of want government to step in and kind of regulate it a little bit, just so that we know what legal frameworks to work within. In a lot of cases, there's not a real clear-cut path for someone like us, an Atlantic Blockchain company. Like, we have no funding at all. Like, we're funded by profits and just our own hard work. And there's not a really good way that we can work with the regulators to build a product. And like, for example, we need all sorts of licenses to become a bank if we actually wanted to have people's funds. And I'm sure that, like, what you do in your work, that you've come across things like that and conversations like that.
Yeah, primarily, I know that you're in Canada, so the US side might be a bit different. We did have a client from Canada, and from what I gathered, their banking laws were much stricter, but it didn't mean that their regulation of cryptocurrency was as tight as the US. The US kind of stepped in about 2013. FinCEN started, issuing guidance on crypto. And back then they categorized it, as not being similar to fiat at all. And then they kind of shifted gears and said, no, cryptocurrency is, similar to other types of money services business, where it is a currency. And so at the federal level here, they view it as a currency. It's very strict to get into registration and all of the compliance. And then once you do register at the federal level, every state has its own licensing scheme. So, for instance, in Washington, you have to go through the full process. It's all online through NMLS. It's the National Mortgage Licensing System, but they also have a lot of MSB licensing done there. And then you have other states like Colorado, where typically you're exempt so long as you're just working in fiat to crypto and crypto to fiat.
That's where Robinhood's from, right? Like that Robinhood, that one company that does. I believe they operate Colorado.
Yeah, Colorado is, not to be biased, but probably my favorite state to work with, because their banking division is very responsive.
And their cannabis division.
Yeah, they really want to kind of welcome cryptocurrency. And so you see a lot of companies setting up there. That's a lot of times where I recommend my company set up.
What about Wyoming?
Go ahead.
Wyoming is also a safe haven for crypto companies, from what I've heard.
Yeah, there's different states where you have exemptions, but the criteria is very specific. Colorado, it's just very broad, so it includes a lot of different types of transaction for exemptions. States like Wyoming, it's a little bit narrower. And then just working with the agency and how they implement the exemptions. Colorado will give, an actual exemption letter. A lot of the other states, they won't do that. So Wyoming, you have to go to the statutes to find that exemption. And so it's nice when you do have an agency that's willing to, write an exemption letter, because the company has that safe haven that, if they do have a complaint from a consumer, they can go to FinCEN and say, look, we got this exemption at the state level. We're registered with FinCEN as an MSB. So it's just a lot, for me, I look at liability, right? So
yeah, totally.
It's a lot safer for that. Yeah.
Wicked. Yeah, Sky, you said earlier that you don't know much, wouldn't consider yourself a financially savvy guy, then went on to tell me about fractional reserve banking and how that's bad. So I think there's some credit there.
Maybe a little bit. I have a question for both of you. Because I was actually listening to your podcast, Keegan, and it was interesting because you're discussing, should you use Bitcoin and transact with it, or should you kind of hold on to it? And you made a good point to say that if you were like to use Bitcoin for like a $2 cup of coffee, that it would make no sense because the fees are anywhere from 50 cents to $2 per transaction. So I was wondering, is there any foreseeable way around this that may be implemented in the future? Because if there's a way to get over that hurdle, then like the blockchain system just seems like it would be such a much more effective way to not only store value, but exchange it, like, you know, just in your every day-to-day transactions. But I guess it might have a lot to do with like the stability of the coin, or.
Yeah, hitting on some good notes there. So definitely there's a thing called the Lightning Network, and it is an enhancement to the blockchain. You can get a Lightning wallet just like you get a Bitcoin wallet, and what you're transacting with on that network is Bitcoin. It's just that you don't have to interact with the underlying blockchain as often, and so it's cheaper and faster. Think of it like this: you walk into a bar and you open a tab. You don't pay for every drink as you buy drinks at the bar. You only pay at the end. You open the tab with your credit card, and at the end of the night, you close the tab and pay once for the total. You can think of you doing that with the Lightning Network. So I could set up a tab with my favorite coffee shop or 4 of my favorite coffee shops. And eventually you're building a network of interaction, like monetary action with interaction with people and businesses in your network, and you have these tabs. That's one way you can transact with Bitcoin. We're a little bit of ways off on that at the moment, but I would recommend that you check out, I think it was episode 16 of our podcast, because we interviewed this gentleman named Michael Peterson from, he runs this thing called Bitcoin Beach in El Salvador. And they've taught young people, old people, people of all ages how to use the Lightning Network. And they're helping people survive through COVID with this by giving people Bitcoin. There's an anonymous sponsor behind it all. It's really, really interesting. So right now in developed countries, like the Canadian dollar holds its value pretty good. Same with the US dollar. And so transacting with Bitcoin doesn't make any sense because we have a reasonably good money at our disposal right now, right? But other people in the world, like Lebanon, Turkey, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, there's more and more of these countries that have currencies that are absolutely not serving the needs of the citizens of those nations. And these people are turning to more forms of currency that are more stable than the one that their government is going to provide them. And so what they're turning to is cryptocurrencies, and Bitcoin, I think, will conquer everything and eventually.
Now, is the Lightning wallet, is that like with like a crypto Visa debit card type thing, or is that separate?
That's a little separate. I think it'll be a while before you have a Lightning, like a Bitcoin Lightning based Visa debit card. But crypto Visa debit cards exist right now. But those are offered by crypto banks, more or less. Like they're still centralized institutions. The Lightning Network is still completely decentralized, and so there's not that huge trust factor.
Okay. Do you have anything to add to that, Ashley?
Yeah, yes, please.
I like that explanation because I get into more the legal side, and it's nice to hear from his side because he gets to kind of practice with it on that other side where, you know, my client could talk about that a lot more.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, the only thing that I see on my side is kind of how those background situations are fostered. For instance, if there's a client that's wanting to start up an exchange, usually they will contract out a lot of services, and you know they have to pay for those services, and so they have to factor that into the transaction fees. And I'm assuming with this Lightning wallet that it's something that they've done in-house, which is brilliant because that's the way that we're hoping we see it start to go. You know, that companies will become more self-sufficient so they can do all the processes in-house instead of having to contract them out. So
now, is there such thing as overdraft fees with digital transactions?
No, you can't send a balance that no one can withdraw from your account. That's one thing to establish. So it's just impossible for you to wake up and see a fee in your Bitcoin account. Which is great. That's cool. I sometimes wake up with fees in my bank account and I get upset. But no, there's no overdraft. So you can't send an amount of Bitcoin that you don't have. It's as simple as that.
I like that. So in an article you wrote you wrote that Bitcoin was born out of the 2008 financial crash, and it will now use the crisis of 2020 to demonstrate its maturity as an asset.
Yeah, I did
elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, Bitcoin's story is amazing. Quite frankly, it's actually just simply amazing. It came from it emerged out of the 2008 financial crash. And let me just put my do not disturb notifications on. I just got a text. Okay, we're good to go. Satoshi Nakamoto. Have either of you heard this name before?
Yes.
This is the mysterious figure behind Bitcoin, and they built it they proposed it in 2008 on Halloween, of all days. And then January 3rd, 2009, they launched the Bitcoin network. And from that day on, it has been completely 100% operational. And that's pretty wicked. It was too early, or it was too late to save us from the 2008 financial crash. And by to save us, I mean like money is being printed all the time, and that's actually really bad. And people need to understand that's really bad and get upset about it. I think like in a very passive way. By buying Bitcoin, you can opt out of the system of money that our governments have set up for us to use. That's a system where they can print money. And one of the core intentions, I would say, of Bitcoin is to have a monetary system where it's impossible to print more. It treats every single person on the earth equally, which is exactly what we need from a monetary system and exactly what we don't have in our current monetary system. When money is printed, it benefits the top the most, and the people at the bottom suffer even more than they're already suffering. And in 2020, the US government just decided to run the printing machine on full for 6 months, and it's worse than ever. It's not a matter of if, in my opinion, it's a matter of when, and buying Bitcoin is something that you can do to protect yourself against this kind of thing.
Definitely. I wanted to touch on some important aspects of like wallet dynamics, like cold versus hot, custodial versus non-custodial. What are the differences? What do you feel that's important to know about the different wallet types?
Yeah, it does actually matter. So like throughout this conversation, you've kind of heard me talk a little bit like passionately about Bitcoin, and I understand that that's not everyone's reality. Like I'm really passionate about keeping my Bitcoin safe and making sure that my money is totally locked down. And so for me, a cold wallet is the best thing for me. Cold meaning it's not attached to the internet. It's a device, but it's not turned on, therefore it's cold. And if it's not attached to the internet, that's just one less risk factor that I need to take into account when securing my funds. Because with cryptocurrency, you are the total and complete owner of the funds. There's no one else that can have a claim on it, which is really cool. It means that you can become your own bank, because that's what we use banks for in the beginning, but now we have blockchain and we don't need banks. And so we can do this ourselves, and that's great. Cold wallets will let you totally own your funds, and they usually provide you with a backup phrase. Your backup phrase is what distinguishes ownership from non-ownership. When you're on an exchange or a crypto bank, then they won't give you a 12-word phrase. When you download a wallet on your phone, Exodus is a really great starter wallet, exodus.io, EXODUS. Then they will give you a 12-word phrase, meaning that wallet lets you own your assets, and that's great. I would recommend that kind of wallet for everyone because I recommend long-term ownership and storage of your funds. And if that's too complicated for you, then using trusted exchanges is a very good thing to do as well. And trusted exchanges, I like Kraken and I like crypto.com.
Now, with the 12 to 24 word phrase, is that the like cryptographic key that one would use? That would be their personal key?
That's one fine way of looking at it. Yeah, what it really is a randomly generated set of words. This is actually one of the really cool things about it. So in order to generate your cryptographic keys that are unique to you, you need something sufficiently random. And it turns out 12 or 24 randomly generated words is fine. The point of having the be words is called a brain key, because you can keep it in your brain. You can memorize 12 words feasibly, right? What you're actually doing is memorizing your money. And that's a really interesting thing. So when people are fleeing countries, which happens all the time, especially in this war-ridden world, we have immigrants all over the place right now and refugees. When they leave a country, it's hard for them to take their wealth with them for a number of reasons. One, because sometimes their wealth is blown up, or other times they can't sell them into money and then take the money across the border, because traveling with money across the border is difficult to do, actually, because the government will impose a tax on that. So that's a really tough problem to solve. How do you solve that? You memorize 12 words that represents your net worth, and you walk across the border.
Yeah, I think you actually brought up like a cool example of putting it to use. You mentioned with, say, like the uprisings in Hong Kong, you were kind of talking about how they were able to keep themselves financially running due to the benefits of cryptocurrency. So I thought that was a really cool example.
Yeah, there's positives and negatives to that as well, because Bitcoin's money. And so there's lots of people using Bitcoin for bad things, and there's lots of people using Bitcoin for good things, and that's going to propagate well into the future. And it's going to be a major criticism of Bitcoin. One that's, I would say that's its main criticism. That's one of the things we get asked most, is like, how do you reconcile the fact that it's used for buying drugs and illegal things on the internet? It's like, well, so is money. Money's money. Money's used for evil things, and it doesn't matter which money it is. The fact of the matter is, I think the pros of the whole system far outweigh the cons, any con.
Definitely. And then now, was it the custodians that you mentioned? You said Kraken, and then what was the other? Was that the custodians, or was
it's crypto.com.
Crypto.com and Kraken. Okay.
Yeah.
And then Kraken.
Both of those companies are really awesome.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
That rings a bell because that's who I was dealing with.
Oh,
Kraken?
He's going, I know that sounds familiar. We get to deal with the onboarding process. And so I'll have multiple clients, getting their accounts with Kraken. And
that's awesome.
It's sometimes there's a lag, and I see one client get theirs granted quicker, and then another client it takes much longer. So he hears me, complaining sometimes. But overall, it's a great system. Kraken and Binance is another good one. So
that's true. Binance is good
out there that are pretty decent. So
I'm so impressed with the state of the crypto business world right now. It's insane. Like, there are some high quality businesses coming out of this space, and I couldn't be more. Unchained Capital, that's another shout out. Like, the software they built is amazing for businesses who want to adopt Bitcoin.
Yeah, there's been a huge push, even when, I want to say it was, 2018, when Goldman Sachs was, saying, oh, Bitcoin's not going to be around, and the price plummeted and it went really low. And I had clients who were panicking, and they would ask, what do you think? And I'm going, well, I'm not supposed to give you financial advice because I'm an attorney, but I will give you a personal opinion. I thought Goldman Sachs was doing that to kind of etch out Bitcoin, to get them out as competition. And I really, kind of said, hey, I see this going in the direction where Goldman Sachs is probably going to have to jump on board. And then lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. So, and you look at the price just between when COVID first hit, and then about 2-3 months ago, it was right at 10,000. Now it's creeping up to 20,000 again. And so I don't think that Bitcoin is going anywhere. I don't think crypto is
going nowhere.
And, it's one of those things that people don't realize how much companies try to change perceptions about the value of different things. And Bitcoin is unique because it's not stock, but it has a rise and fall value similar to what stock has. That's why you see kind of the SEC trying to step into that regulatory zone. And then FinCEN kind of going, wait, we need to kind of figure this out because it's not really under the SEC. And it just creates confusion because to go in a little bit more about what happened with that as well is the SEC regulates, when there are investors that are investing into a company and they're owning shares. So you might have a cryptocurrency company that is selling shares. They're not selling crypto. They kind of did away with the ICO because they were trying to get around IPOs and it just didn't work. They still have
that didn't work.
Yeah. And SEC said, well, you guys need to still register, but we don't really have a process set up for an ICO. So it just kind of fell through the water. But now you see them kind of starting to catch up with regulations. And there's still all of those same laws that apply to getting investors to purchase shares, into the company itself. So you have, Reg D, Reg A, certain exemptions for registration if you're doing a certain amount of financing and all that. And that's where I think people got so confused and panicked. They thought, oh my gosh, the SEC is going to, crack down and they're going to have to do everything, like it's a stock exchange. I'm going, no. It's not quite that complex. It's just a very different type of thing that they're looking at. It's the shares. It's not the actual Bitcoin itself. So you see that stuff fleshing out more often now. And, I think it's great that we have people like you that get into this, that are trying to help people understand this, because it is so easy to get so caught up in what the media is reporting, and they just don't know.
They just have no idea.
Yeah, but they don't. I love reading the articles, and I'm going, hey, you guys
They're
got
fun
that,
sometimes.
you got that right. And you stated it, this is what it is, but okay, there's some factual stuff in there, but I don't think it's intentional. I think it's just that they can't wrap their heads around everything. So.
Factual by accident.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So Keegan, what does the fourth wave look like to you? I mean, we just recently saw Kraken become legitimized as a United States banking institution, and that was kind of a huge win for crypto, and things appear to be looking good in that regard. What are your thoughts as far as that goes?
The fourth wave, I did write an article recently with that nomenclature. Did you, are you referring to that?
I read a little bit about it, yeah. So I was curious.
Okay, yeah. I actually, at this time, I forget what the first, second, and third wave is. But the fourth wave is basically the last 10, 11 years that Bitcoin's been in existence, people have been building technologies to on-ramp fiat into the Bitcoin system. And those systems were not at scale. That is one of the large barriers that people with millions or billions of dollars might have with getting into crypto. And so it's not a simple thing. I'll give you a good example. MicroStrategy. There's this company that just took $425 million of their company's treasury, of the reserve assets in cash, and they bought Bitcoin with it. They just Bitcoin. And in order to do that, you do need an exchange that can sell you 38,000 Bitcoin at a price. These are very sophisticated people. They didn't move the price. They were there from August until September, October, and the price really was not jumping like someone was buying 38,000 of the Bitcoin. For reference, only 900 Bitcoin are created every single day, and that's down from half as much in May, which was 1,800 in May. Now we're down to 900 new Bitcoin per day. So you can kind of think of it like this, like it was 40 some days of Bitcoin production that they bought off the market, and they're buying them and they're holding them forever, says the CEO. I think that's the fourth wave is we're at the scale of millionaires and billionaires. We're at the scale of publicly traded companies buying Bitcoin because it's a reserve asset. It's a better reserve asset than cash. And Square just followed suit. Episode 10 of our podcast, we interviewed a gentleman by the name of Ali Hammam from Ontario, Canada. And he owns a restaurant chain. So a lot smaller than $425 million, but he converted his business's cash reserves into Bitcoin because it was a good decision. He's like, this makes so much sense. And I heard of his news before MicroStrategy's news. So he was doing this on a small scale before the big player came in and announced what they were doing, which was that was amazing. So that the fourth wave is when these companies and millionaires and billionaires come in. and it's not too late for the little guy.
That was going to be my next question. So is it too late? Or is it not too late? You don't think so? Yeah.
I don't think it's too late at all. I think an ideal scenario would be more people transacting with it, because not everyone has money to buy Bitcoin with, but everyone, more or less, I shouldn't use the word everyone, but people who can work can obtain Bitcoin through work, because Bitcoin is money and people pay the other people money to do work for them. And so when enough people you'll go through these swellings, and there's been 3 or 4 swellings of the Bitcoin network in the past. Like it started at less than a penny up to $10, right? And then it took a while to get beyond $100, then $1,000. And we're in this next wave, and it's going to more than likely, I would say, go above $100,000 in the next 2 years, and that sounds okay. That sounds in keeping with the swelling. And when it rises, what causes it to fall is people will spend it. They will get rid of it. You have a certain amount of Bitcoin people that will absolutely never spend their Bitcoin. They've been very vocal and adamant about that in public. The CEO of this MicroStrategy company is one of them. But people will spend it because it's worth more to them, and they can buy things with it. And that Bitcoin will enter circulation, and people who are willing to put in work can obtain it, or people that have money can buy it. And it's not too late. It's not too late, because the upper limit on Bitcoin is that it'll become the global reserve. And so you're splitting $250 trillion worth of assets on the planet. And if Bitcoin is that measure of how much of those assets you have, then that's pretty cool. That's
Definitely. Yeah. Now I've heard it, or sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Ashley wants to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, have you heard of quantum financial?
Quantum financial?
Yes.
I have not. Enlighten me.
So I'll tell you, a close friend of mine who, different political views a little bit, sent me this text and said, "Isn't this great?" Because he knows that I work in crypto. And so I watched this video, and it's from a company called Quantum Financial. And it's talking about basically getting rid of the Federal Reserve and our banking system currently, and making this new type of
digital currency.
The only problem with this is that this would be run by the government, and it would replace the central bank. And they talk about how secure it will be and so much better. And all of these other cryptocurrencies are so unsafe, and if we just eliminate the other cryptocurrencies and turn to this one currency, the world can use this currency system. And no one will have access to this currency system without going through checks and all of these, things that they have to be vetted for. And this terrified me, because as a lawyer, all I'm thinking is, what are the implications if this gets into the wrong hands? It's great if someone with good intentions runs the system and they really try to make it fair and all of that. But if it's someone who has poor intentions, they could freeze assets without any way for that individual to, have any recourse, because even with fiat, someone could kind of get, a judgment that their funds are going to be frozen at the bank. They have a certain amount of time frame for that to happen. They could go pull those funds out in cash before that, that sweep comes through. This basically eliminates that possibility. And to me, that's terrifying. That's the direction I don't want to see crypto go. Because
that's
I
right.
think that what makes crypto great is that it is a free market, and it's something that is not centralized. And in essence, if one country or another came up with a system like that, that basically made other systems illegal, problematic,
I think that's going to happen. China is already in the process of rolling theirs out. They did that in April, but you stated all that wonderfully. That was great. I agree with everything. I don't want to see a system like that at all. I would really like to. So yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say. So you were saying China's in the midst of rolling out a system similar to the quantum financial system she was talking about. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, so these things are
wow.
called central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, and it's definitely possible to do well. And I would love to see the United States one and Canada one. I really think every single country will have it at some point, and they'll all be competing with Bitcoin because they're just like when I heard Ashley, you describing what your friend was telling you on this website, like it can be a money we all use, and it can just be so much better than everything because it's more secure. It's like no, that's Bitcoin. Like, you're just describing Bitcoin. Stop. You don't need that other quantum thing.
Right. And well, when I've talked to Sky about this before, because obviously when I see something like this, I'm going, we discuss. And if it was a situation where, there were other types of crypto that could still be in play, and it created a competition, I think that would be okay, because we kind of have that right now with fiat anyhow, in the central bank versus cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, types like that. And it's interesting to me that China was coming up with this system before I saw this, video about quantum financial. It was kind of a response to China starting to do this, and China outlawed cryptocurrency quite some time ago.
They've done that and like flip-flopped on it so many times. They I can't keep track.
Well, it's really confusing too, because when we draft, the AML policies, I have to look at on an international scale, if my clients are going to be trading internationally, we have to do our due diligence, and we have to not transact in countries where it's illegal. And China always pops up on the list that's, banned. Hong Kong, it's really interesting because the climate in Hong Kong, it's part of the Republic of China, but it's still, as far as legal implications for crypto, it's been separated somewhat throughout, the last 3 or 4 years. And so oftentimes in China, when it's banned, then in Hong Kong, it's still not. And like you said, China's flip-flopped back and forth, and then surprise, surprise, they're coming out with, their own centralized cryptocurrency. So hopefully it will go the direction of having still that free market exchange in countries like the US and, typically countries that are more democratic republics. So we'll see.
We will see.
Definitely. And I heard you mention something about like currency wars in one of your podcasts. Is this kind of what you're alluding to in that regard, sort of?
Yeah, the one that we didn't talk about is a business coin, though. So I want to talk, usually how I frame this for people is you got to think about who the currency serves, and it serves who has control of it. It's as simple as that. And so the 4 competing currencies that I would reckon to point out is the Chinese central bank digital currency, the US dollar, and those are the 2 main competing currencies on the world stage as far as countries go. And then Facebook is trying to build Libra, and Libra is not just owned by Facebook. It's actually the proposed idea is that 100 of the largest and most digitally technically advanced companies will buy a seat at this table for $1 billion each. And that's how they start this money. And that's who owns that? Well, 100 of the most technically competent companies owns that. That's whose interest that money would serve. And then Bitcoin serves no one. And therefore it serves everyone. And that's why it's the people's currency. And I think that one of the things that scares me about the CBDC is exactly what you pointed out, the ability to stop the flow of money. What happens when they make buying Bitcoin with their system illegal? Because if it's all digital, they can absolutely prevent that. They can never prevent a peer-to-peer transaction, though. I can always meet with you, and you can send me Bitcoin right there on the spot, and that's cool. The business coin scares me a lot as well, because the businesses are weird. I have no idea what they'd come up with. I do not want to see what kind of weird business twist they would have on it. That sounds weird. I like Bitcoin. It serves the interests of people. It's very simple. It's not complex. It does what it does, and it does it well. So that's where I'm staying.
Definitely. And then So you mentioned like the people's coin and then the business coin, and then what about the Fed? How do they tie into this?
Yeah, well, the Federal Reserve would more than likely be the arbiter of the US dollar, the future CBDC US dollar. I'm not, see, it has the potential to really change the way things work if you completely overhaul the system and build a CBDC. So it's actually a great opportunity for America to participate in the restructuring of their money. It can go really well for America. I'm not so sold on having a world without fiat currencies. They may play a role. Governments are important. And so I would like them to build it with the best of intentions in mind. But I sadly just don't see those intentions. I'm like constantly berated by the fact that the NSA thing happened with Edward Snowden, and that's really embarrassing. And I would love to see America do better. I would like to see them be a role model in this way and lead the world in like a really positive way. That's kind of how I've conceptualized America growing up. But it's just not what I see right now, which is how I feel about it.
Thank you.
I think the sentiment that you feel is true for a lot of Americans right now. I mean, and I'm sure that you've seen with the elections, you saw this really outward conflict that we have not had. I mean, I think since the Civil War and around the time of, it just, we've reached such a point in time that, globalization and technology is advancing at such a quick state that I think it's difficult for legislation to keep up with. We have all of this social media that now, with a touch of a button, you have access to information, unlimited information.
Unlimited.
Right, and we have all this information thrown at us, but before we had an opportunity to learn how to decipher what is true, what is legitimate, what is questionable, right? And
you totally lost that.
Oh yeah. People, I mean, they get so used to being fed everything that I think that, society on whole has somewhat become just a little bit lazier. And lazy, I don't mean physically, I just mean that, they're not putting as much thought into questioning the things that get thrown at them every day. They're already
intellectually lazy.
Right. They're overwhelmed with so much information that it's easier just to pick a certain news station, right? that they think represents what they want to hear. And then they buy into everything that they hear. It's so dangerous to do that. In America, when it was founded, our founding fathers really emphasized freedom of speech and, public forum for debates, because that was the process through which you could test and challenge ideas and concepts. And you didn't have all of this white noise. And I think that now we've just seen such a diversion away from that. And all of these social media companies, the media itself, legislators, they're kind of scrambling to figure out, what do we do with this? So,
Good question.
With the election, it does give me hope, because regardless of what political side someone is on, I've told Sky that the very concept of, our democracy when it was founded was to create tension between political parties in such a way that the government would never become too large. If you have a government where there's not political parties, it's unified, and then it can turn on the people. If you have a government where you have, Republicans, Democrats, Tories, and Whigs, right, constantly keeping each other in check, it actually does good for the public. I think people have difficulty understanding that. So when I see a shift in power from one party to another, for me, that's a reconfirmation that, okay, we still have that balance there, So.
That's amazing. That shift in power that's coming, it's going to happen in a lot of different ways. But in the one that I want to point out just for a second is the changing what countries define money as. If you look in the vaults of the countries all around the world, and the central banks, they hold the gold. And I think this will be a very profound flippening for them, an event that that they like have to do a double take on. That would be really good if our countries were kept in check in this way specifically, because it's a way that they've always, it's something that they've literally for all time have had a control over the people for. This is a new time in history where the people actually can put the control of money, the power of money in their own hands. That's whack. That is crazy. And that's what I'm really excited about. And that's actually what gives me hope at the end of the day. By the way, hope.com leads to Bitcoin information. Just so everyone knows.
Now, I've heard people say that, like with Bitcoin, it inevitably hits like a wall or something. I don't know too much about that, but do you know what I'm talking about?
I think so. Bitcoin will stop. There's a finite amount of them, right? That's for step one. There's 21 million Bitcoin. That's the first thing you should know. 18.5 million Bitcoin currently are in circulation. That's about 85% of its supply. The next 15%, the last 15% of its total supply will take 120 years to come into existence, to come into circulation. And this is one of its mechanisms where it controls the supply. It schedules the supply. Everyone can check, anyone can check that what I'm saying right now is true. And they can be sure that those Bitcoins will be printed more or less on the schedule, which is great. And year 2140, there will be no more Bitcoin being mined. All of the Bitcoin will have been mined at this point. Mining is the process through which Bitcoin enters circulation. It's a very complicated process, but it's mining, and that's what it does. It brings Bitcoin into circulation. There'll be no more mining to be done in 2140. And that's like a wall of sorts. I think that's kind of the question that you're asking, because usually the next question is, well, what incentive will the miners have to run the network after that point if there's no reward? Well, the reward is the amount of Bitcoin that is produced at block, which at that point will be zero, plus the transaction fees from the block. And that is great. You can mine Bitcoin and receive money for it still. Even after 2140. So I would say whatever wall you've heard about doesn't exist. That's not a wall. That's just what will Bitcoin be worth at that point? Those transaction fees could be on the orders of billions of dollars at that point. That's really interesting. No wall. I hope that answers and clears that up.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I haven't really heard it put like that before, but that makes a lot of sense. Now,
that's good.
I wanted to ask you actually just a question I had noted down earlier. You mentioned Reg A and Reg something else. What was that you were talking about?
That's just, we're going to bore the audience with that. In Regulation B, you basically have to file with the SEC and register if you're selling shares, and you have to be licensed if you're selling shares to investors. There's exemptions where you don't have to be licensed for certain companies if they have direct contacts, if it's a qualified investor. There's all of this criteria that allows for an exemption. You still have to file with the SEC to notify them that you're claiming this exemption. And Reg A is, based on limit amounts, and then Reg D is based more on the type of investor that you're seeking investment funds from. So
that makes sense. And then Keegan, could we talk maybe a little bit about like mining and the current state of mining operations, and kind of what it, maybe briefly, like what it takes to get a mining operation going that will actually be worth it for somebody at this state that we're at right now? Sure.
Yeah, totally. Mining's a really fascinating conversation. Actually, it's very multifaceted, and it's not black and white. I don't think it's. I think it's a highly technical procedure, operation, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. The equation basically boils down to how much you pay for electricity, and you can be profitable as long as you have enough computing power. So you do need chips. You need specialized chips. They're called ASICs, A-S-I-C. It stands for Application Specific Integrated Circuit. and they're useless. They're totally useless except for one thing, and that's mining Bitcoin. Like, you actually literally couldn't do basically anything useful with them if you had them, a warehouse of them. The only thing they're good for is mining Bitcoin. So it's kind of funny because we spend so much energy and so much money mining this stuff, but then you get a return. And the reason why you get a return is because Bitcoin is worth a lot of money. And yeah. Do you want to ask another question? Like, get me back on track here.
Yeah, so that's so interesting. It kind of reminds me of I think it was like a Batman movie or something where they had like all these servers in this giant room. And I'm like thinking, like, towards the end of Bitcoin, once people are mining to that level, like, how crazy is it going to get, like, for the operations? So I was wondering, like, where it's at right now. Because is it that the more it goes on, the more and more computing power and more servers and all that stuff, like, you have to have, or is it a little different?
Yeah, so I'll try to put this as simply as I possibly can, but I'm going to describe like the mining process. And yeah, when you add more computers to the network, Bitcoin produces a block on average once every 10 minutes. Okay, and the more computers that you add to a network, the faster that theoretically could be done. That 10 minutes would take less than 10 minutes. And then at that point, you would kind of mess with this whole Bitcoin schedule thing I laid out earlier. So the network actually dynamically adjusts to the number of computers in its network. So if there's more computers in the network, the whole Bitcoin will adjust so it's a problem that they're trying to solve, adjust the difficulty of the problem, so that the problem always takes on average 10 minutes to solve. And that's a really neat feature. So that's how Bitcoin stays on schedule. And so in the future, I think people will have Bitcoin miners in their pockets. They'll have them in their homes, because it turns out that these computers generate a lot of heat. And so in places where it's cold, you can run a Bitcoin miner and get paid to heat your house rather than paying to burn oil to heat your house. You can actually pay to mine Bitcoin and use the heat as a space heater. So that's kind of cool. I think Bitcoin miners are going to be everywhere. And back to like, is it profitable still? Sure, it's profitable. You may have to wait for Bitcoin to appreciate in value to recoup your losses not your losses, but the expense of setting up the operation, as well as the operating costs. But I would not be surprised at whatever bounty you get from mining, as long as you hodl it, you're good to go.
Yeah, so if you live somewhere freezing like Canada, for instance, you could get some mining equipment and warm yourself up.
That's right.
That's pretty awesome.
Remember, Sky, there was one time we were talking about, if you don't buy the right equipment and you just buy a system that is kind of half of what everyone else has, people can be mining that same block, and it's whoever gets it solved first. So you could be putting all that effort into, so you want to make sure you have the proper equipment and the proper materials, because otherwise, you're putting money to something it's going to be a lot harder for you to get a block. So
that's right.
Yeah. And Keegan, you actually had a job at one point where you actually got paid entirely in crypto. Is that correct?
Yeah, I took my salary in Bitcoin for about 6 months.
So how was that for you? Did it
fun.
Work? Everything worked well, or?
Yeah, at the time I was actually using Quadriga CX. Do you guys know that platform? Actually, you may have heard of it because it was the gentleman that died with $192 million. He had the only access to the keys to the exchange, and he died mysteriously. It's that whole story. And so I was using that exchange when it was operational to trade my Bitcoin for Canadian dollars, and then get my Canadian dollars into my bank account so I could pay for expenses. But I kept as much in Bitcoin as I possibly could, because I've held the belief that cash is like really, I don't have a lot of cash. There's very little reason for me to have any cash at all. I can think of very few. So just everything in Bitcoin, and then cash when I need it, kind of thing. And I have enough. I've established my off ramps well enough. Like, so when we work with our clients, we help them establish crypto on ramps and crypto off ramps. So going from fiat to crypto, and then crypto to fiat, and basically make them have nice financial life as far as moving money around goes. And I've established those routes, paths, off ramps, and that allows me to be pretty free with my money.
Now, in terms of, I think it was like a custodian is where you would purchase your Bitcoin, and then that would be through like Binance or one of those.
Yeah.
And security-wise, has there ever been any like hacks, or how's that all working out so far?
There's hacks all the time. I usually once a month. But like the biggest hack one of the biggest hacks was Mt. Gox, Magic the Gathering online exchange. It was in like 2014, 2013. Something like 800,000 Bitcoin were stolen, just an obscene amount of Bitcoin. But Binance was hacked as well. They lost $42 million. They happen to be pretty good at security as well. But they made good on the money. They're a really reputable company. They're one of the best. What I look for right now is companies that have insurance against hacks, because that is more and more common. Coinbase has it, Gemini has it, and Crypto.com has it. And that's great if you can insure the loss or like the risk of getting hacked, because it's always possible. Like, don't ever convince yourself that you can't be hacked, because that's exactly when you can be hacked. The companies need to constantly be innovating and improving on that. And I really only like to work with companies that either allow me to own my cryptocurrency directly, or is demonstrated to me that they have invested in security.
So on the US side, all cryptocurrency companies that operate in states where they have to have licenses have to have insurance. And it's in the form of bonding. So, and the bonding requirements are based on the expected volume of the transactions. And so the companies have to actually take the value of crypto at what it is at the point the transaction occurs. And then when they report their volume in transactions, it would be, the final proceeds for that month. Sometimes their bonds get increased for what they require. And then they also, on top of the bonding, have to have a net worth requirement, which is assets that are untouched that back that cryptocurrency as well. So it's really strict on the US side for the companies that are licensed. And you can find out if they're licensed by looking at where they're incorporated. You can go to FinCEN and type in MSB registration, and you can type in the name of company, find out if they're registered, find out the states that they hold licenses in and where they're transacting. And then you can actually go to the state and type in money transmitter license and then pull up, what their licensing is. So if you see that they're registered with FinCEN and they have a license in the states they're transacting, that they're insured. And the government is really strict. I've seen them freeze a large amount of assets if there's a transaction that, is questionable, or if there's a fraud alert. And their go-to is to send that money back to the customer side while the investigation is pending. So.
Yeah, you definitely don't want that. I don't want my money turned off.
Interesting. So I was wondering, I don't know if this is might be it for you, easier to explain. Could you walk us through because I've heard and I've watched videos on blockchain and how it works, and with a digital ledger, and it breaks it down into these, it's kind of complicated. So I don't know if you could articulate it in a way that could be kind of more graspable for the audience and myself.
Yeah, I've got a go-to kind of full of analogies. It's I want you to think of a ledger that is kept for a business, just a business. And on that ledger, transactions are recorded. And you can imagine a book that you open up, and there's many pages in the book. So you open the book, you start writing transactions on the page. At the end of the day, you sign your name at the bottom of that page. You turn the page, and tomorrow you will write tomorrow's transaction on the next page and sign your name on it, and then so on and so forth. So these pages are like blocks. The blockchain is like the book. each page records transactions, and once it's signed, you can think that that page is permanent. Okay, so you can never touch it, you can never erase it. You're writing in a pen that can never be erased, and the pages you can't tear out. So everything that takes place in this book is permanent, and that's a really fundamental aspect of a blockchain, is permanence. Now I want you to now think that there are 5, 10, 15, 20, 100, 100,000 accountants, each keeping their own book and recording every single transaction in their own page and getting someone else to sign it. So everyone's checking everyone else's work, and they're constantly passing around this collection of books, and they're each keeping a copy, and they're all keeping each other honest, kind of like how Ashley was talking about the democracy of America earlier, which is great. Let's check each other's work when we make laws, maybe. That's a good idea. So democracy is kind of like a blockchain of sorts, if you want to think about it. They all go to their House of Commons or their parliament, and they get together, they write stuff down and in the sequence of the events that they occurred. And yeah, that's kind of cool. I never actually thought about that, but that's also like a democracy. I hope that definition cleared things up a little bit. It's just basically a way of keeping track of numbers in a large format. Like I like to joke, the Bitcoin network does one thing and one thing only, and that's it keeps track of Bitcoin. That's the only thing it does.
No, that was really a good explanation. And then I wonder, that might kind of tie in, I've heard these terms like a hard fork, soft fork. What does that mean?
Yeah, that's when a renegade group of your accountants decides that they're actually got the real books, and so they go over there and they start a side business called Bitcoin Cash, and then they talk about Bitcoin Cash, and they're recording transactions for the Bitcoin Cash business. I kind of do mean that tongue in cheek. Bitcoin Cash is a really interesting project as well, but it's not the true Bitcoin. So
True Bitcoin seems like it's a pretty solid way to go as far as what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think so.
Ashley, any last other thoughts, any questions?
No, I think, to be honest, his explanation of the ledger is probably the best one I've heard.
Yeah.
I like that.
Keegan, is there any other important aspects of crypto that people should be aware of, or that could be enlightening, that you want to throw out there before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I would encourage people to ask themselves a couple questions. The first of which is, what is money? Because you've probably been conditioned to think it's one thing, and it turns out it's like a multitude. It's a big question to ask. And okay, so what is money? Not your keys, not your crypto. Basically what that one means is if you don't own the private keys, if you don't own a 12-word phrase, your digits on the screen are not yours. Like if you're working with a bank or a crypto exchange, and you want to have a guarantee on the ownership of your Bitcoin, you need to put it in a wallet that you control that gives you the 12 words. That's just really, really important for everyone who ever considers crypto to know. The last thing I would say is ask yourself why you're getting into crypto, because everyone's reason is different. Mine, I came for the profits and I stayed for the philosophy, or like all of the other implications. Like I dove deep down the Bitcoin and money rabbit hole, and I think it's kind of socially irresponsible not to own Bitcoin. Actually, like we have kind of a responsibility to dismantle this bad money machine that we have all been a part of for so long. And the faster we do it, the better we can do it. But you should ask yourself why yourself. Ask it to yourself, and whatever your own reasons are, they're very good to be aware of, because they will dictate what you're using crypto for. Like, are you in for mad gains, or are you in because you want to save for your children's education in the future? Like that, maybe it's your retirement. Basically, do financial planning and consider Bitcoin as an asset to achieve your goals. That's kind of what I'm an advocate for.
Well said. Can I get you to reiterate your philosophy once more before we wrap this up?
Oh yeah, I can actually just condense it. Okay. I came for the gains and I stayed for the philosophy. Like, is that what you mean?
Well, I wanted to get you to elaborate a little bit more on what your philosophy and why you're so passionate about it. Just once more, give it, the last note this is why,
Okay.
you're so passionate about it.
Sure.
I like how he said it though, because he's saying that he initially came for the profit, but then he stayed for the philosophy. So at first it was more of a monetary value, but then the dynamics of the system and everything that encompasses it, I think, is why he stayed. So
Yeah, I think so. I have spent a lot of time of my own life just thinking, how can I have the biggest impact in the world? What can I do on my level that is meaningful about global warming, about just inequalities all over the place, financial being one of them, and how can I have an impact on that? And I can do that with my dollar. Like I learned vote with your dollar early on. That was like a phrase that I learned. Where you spend your money absolutely matters. You give it to a store down your street that's in your community. You give it to Walmart. Like I'm not bashing on Walmart, but you go give it to Walmart, it's gone somewhere else. And when I learned of Bitcoin, that whole thing. Okay, vote with your dollar. Wait, what's dollar? Dollar's money. Vote with your money. Wait, what's money? Whoa, Bitcoin's money? Like, okay, so I can voluntarily not hold this stuff that gives other people I don't like power. That's cool. So, like, I don't know. I have many philosophies about this. Like, I do think it's a social responsibility to eventually own Bitcoin, or at least don't use something that doesn't resonate with your values. And I know that's easier said than done. I'm still using the Canadian dollar because this is a long process. This is a 50-year haul. So you need to broaden your time horizons and think about not just your future, but also maybe your children's future. Like, what world do you want them to live in? I want them to live in a world where the value of money doesn't go down over time. That sounds awesome. I want my kids to live. I want to pass on my wealth as something that goes up over time, something as rare and valuable as gold. Digital gold is what I would venture to leave them.
That's exactly what I was looking for. Yeah, I mean, we're basically voting with every transaction we make.
Yeah.
I think that's a really insightful way to put it. Awesome. Well, this was a pretty awesome podcast. I'm really great.
I had fun. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Sky.
Absolutely. Where can people find out more about you and your work, and where do you want to direct them to? Any websites or social media or any of that?
Yeah, I could actually probably fire you some links as well if you want for your show description. But my company, my podcast, like hearing more about our thoughts, is you can go to gofullcrypto.com. That's GOFULL crypto.com. And we have a podcast, we write a blog. We're on several other blogging sites like Publish.to and CryptoVantage, and we're doing cool things. So we're not going to stop doing cool things. We're not going to stop talking about Bitcoin. We're going to do this for a while, at least the next decade. So tune in and join this journey with us.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.